Come to what you're going to do, but I just want to get clear on what you think the problem you're solving is. Has the economy declined, got worse, more difficult since you came to office, or not?
The economy is not growing fast enough. I'm not satisfied with the numbers that we see at the moment.
It's not growing at all. The last month was 0.1. OK, it's gone up and down a bit, but it's basically flat on its back.
And it's not possible within just a few months to reverse more than a decade of economic stagnation. But we are making the changes that's necessary to get Britain building again, to bring money into the economy. The International Investment Summit that we hosted last year.
I don't think the living standards are going to fall. In fact, you're suggesting that they're rising now and they'll continue to rise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Inflation was on its way down when you came in. It's actually slightly ticking.
Rachel Reeves faced some tough questions during her recent interview with Trevor Phillips. As the conversation unfolded, he challenged several of her points, leaving her briefly at a loss for words. During the interview, Trevor Phillips calmly asked Rachel Reeves to explain the 22 billion sterling black hole she frequently mentioned. It was a straightforward question, but it changed the tone of the conversation. Reeves, despite her prominent economic role, appeared briefly caught off guard. For someone responsible for overseeing the UK's finances, she struggled to explain the origin of the figure or provide a clear justification.
Some say as by as much as a half. You have no fiscal headroom left. Just how serious is the country's financial situation?
I'm not going to preempt the Office of Budget Responsibility's forecast, but the world has changed. We can all see that before our eyes. And government are not inactive in that. We'll respond to the change and continue to meet our fiscal rules, but we're also shaping the new world, whether that's in the defence and security realm or indeed on the economy. I promised at the general election to bring stability back to the economy. As a result of that stability, interest rates have been cut 3 times since the general election. That's a far cry from the 11% inflation and the interest rate hikes that we saw under the previous government, and that's only been possible because we've put our public finances on a firm footing, and we've also put our public services on a firm footing, which is what I did in the budget last year.
This is rather cheerful.
The next 6 minutes went beyond mere political awkwardness. It marked the steady breakdown of a key narrative. Rachel Reeves contradicted herself, brushed aside data that questioned her stance, and ultimately left the public with more questions than answers. It wasn't just an unsteady moment, it exposed deeper concerns. For many who've doubted the way politicians use statistics, this exchange felt like validation. The turning point came with Phillips's first question, a seemingly simple but precisely targeted prompt. Can you explain exactly what this £22 billion sterling black hole is? His tone was steady, but the purpose behind the question was unmistakable. It wasn't just about clarification, it directly challenged the core of Reeves's economic case. What followed wasn't just a slip-up, it was the slow unravelling of a message that had, until then, gone largely untested.
Inflation was on its way down when you came in. It's actually slightly ticking back up. But the point I really wanted to ask you about is to describe how serious you think it is. The Joseph Rowntree Trust Foundation today predicts a huge fall in living standards by the end of this Parliament.
I reject that.
You think they're just wrong?
I reject that, and the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast this week. Living standards in the last Parliament were the worst ever on record. The Office of Budget Responsibility forecast, in October that living standards would increase at double the rate in this Parliament as they did in the last Parliament. They'll set out their updated numbers this week. But if you look at wages at the moment, wages are rising today at twice the rate of inflation. That is very different from what we saw under the previous government.
But just to be clear, you're saying that you simply don't think that living standards are going to fall. In fact, you're suggesting that they're rising now and they'll continue to rise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm confident.
Reeves opened with the image of a reluctant truth-teller, portraying the £22 billion sterling figure as an unfortunate consequence of her predecessor's fiscal mismanagement. She cast herself as the responsible chancellor delivering difficult news, like a doctor outlining a tough but necessary course of treatment for a struggling economy. The message was deliberate. Austerity wasn't a choice, it was the only option. Her delivery was composed and confident, clearly shaped to frame her policies as both justified and unavoidable. But Trevor Phillips wasn't convinced. Drawing on years of experience holding public figures to account, Phillips took a measured approach. He avoided grandstanding, opting instead for accuracy. Referring directly to Treasury documents, he calmly highlighted discrepancies between Reeves's claims and her own government's data, exposing the gaps without raising his voice.
We will see living standards increase during the course of this Parliament. What we've already seen in these last few months of the Labour government is a sustained increase in living standards. Next month, at the beginning of April, people on the national living wage will see a 6.7% increase in their wages, £1,400 more a year. That's only possible because of the stability that we have returned to the economy. And of course, those three cuts in interest rates from the Bank of England mean that mortgage rates are lower than they otherwise would have been. We've got to do more, absolutely, in terms of raising living standards, but this government have already got started in delivering our plan for change.
Well, look, there's
This wasn't simply a case of a journalist seeking clarification, it was a careful, methodical unravelling of a political narrative. One by one, Phillips compared Reeves's public statements with verifiable data, and the inconsistencies began to stand on their own. As Reeves struggled to explain her position, the story she'd been building started to falter. Initially, she claimed the $22 billion sterling shortfall stemmed from day-to-day spending. But then, in a puzzling shift, she implied the issue lay in capital spending instead. Moments later, she appeared to circle back, creating a loop that suggested confusion more than clarity. It didn't feel like a simple slip-up. It raised a more troubling question. Was the Chancellor herself unclear about the nature of the financial gap she was warning the country about?
You can say the picture you've just painted, but there's a different way of seeing this. Inflation isn't coming down as fast as you hoped it was.
Well, again, the Office of Budget Responsibility will do their forecast.
Well, they'll do their... Well, I'm just... never mind the forecast. Let's look at what's happened already. Inflation's not coming down at the rate you hoped it was. Interest rates are being held. They're not coming down. Growth figures are absolutely flat, and per capita growth is actually falling. Are you being a bit complacent about where we are now?
I know that we need to go further and faster in delivering economic growth and seeing public services improve. But there are no shortcuts here. It's the hard yards that are necessary.
But if you want to do people to do the hard yards, you have to convince them, surely, that the situation demands it. And what we're hearing this morning from you, I'm afraid, is one that says, actually, it's kind of OK, don't worry too much.
Things have changed since the general election. We've had cuts in interest rates, not hikes in interest rates, and wages are rising faster than inflation. That was not the case in the previous Parliament, which was the worst on record for living standards. But are you saying, do we need to do more to grow the economy, to address the cost of living crisis? Absolutely we do. That is why we are reducing bureaucracy and regulation. It's why we are reforming the pension system to bring more money into the economy and so much more.
What made the interview so compelling wasn't just Reeves' difficulty in providing clear answers. It was how she handled the pressure. Rather than offering clarity, she backtracked. Instead of adjusting her message, she dug in further. Each new explanation only added to the confusion, exposing a lack of consistency that couldn't be dismissed as a simple misstep. Phillips' approach was measured and precise. He didn't argue or interrupt, he just kept returning to her own statements and official data. When she deflected, he gently redirected. When she veered off course, he brought the focus back. The outcome was a rare kind of political exchange, one that didn't just highlight conflicting points, but revealed a broader weakness in the narrative Labour had been trying to maintain. Reeves's responses began to feel less like answers and more like attempts to navigate in the dark. Her grip on the topic didn't just slip, it disappeared entirely.
The situation we're in is you, and how much is the past? You routinely blame the Tories for the situation you're in, but business leaders routinely say that it was your pessimistic messages in the autumn that discouraged spending, your national insurance rise that halted hiring and depressed the economy. Honestly, looking back at it now, did you overdo the doom and gloom?
When I became Chancellor, we did inherit a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
Much
I had to take...
contested, but anyway.
Well, the OBR set out that in the numbers they published last year. We have addressed that. It did require difficult decisions, particularly in terms of tax.
But that's not what I'm asking about. The message you were giving, and the Prime Minister, through the autumn was, it's terrible, it's awful, we have to do all sorts of things. Did you overdo the pessimism?
No, we took the action that was necessary to ensure that our public services and public finances were on a firm footing. And the tax, the national insurance, the non-dom tax...
As the interview continued, the contradictions in Reeves's statements began to feel less like slip-ups and more like a recurring theme. One of the most revealing moments came when Trevor Phillips cited a report by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, an organisation widely respected for its research on poverty and inequality. The report painted a stark picture of the UK economy: increasing poverty, stagnant wages, and families struggling to cover essential expenses. It stood in clear contrast to the outlook Reeves had been presenting. But rather than addressing the findings or offering an evidence-based counterpoint, she dismissed the report entirely. No facts, no alternative data, just a flat denial. It was more than a poor response. It raised deeper concerns about how policy is being crafted. Was Reeves truly engaging with the full picture, or was she selecting only the data that supported her narrative? Her quick dismissal of such a credible source suggested the latter. It gave the impression of a chancellor more focused on maintaining a storyline than grappling with economic realities, a leader who shaped the message first, then found numbers to support it. And just as she was asking the public to embrace spending cuts and shared sacrifice, headlines revealed she had recently attended a VIP concert at the O2 Arena, with premium seating and exclusive perks. The timing couldn't have been worse.
The system is failing. It failed the little girls, and it failed everybody who is actually still at risk.
I mean, it's appalling what happened in Southport.
At a time when many families are cutting back on essentials, struggling with heating costs, rising grocery bills, and volatile mortgage rates, the image of the Chancellor enjoying exclusive concert perks struck a nerve. It wasn't just a case of bad optics. It highlighted a deeper disconnect between the messages politicians deliver and the lives they actually lead. The contrast was striking. While urging the public to tighten their belts, Reeves appeared to be enjoying the kind of privileges most people can't imagine. For many, it wasn't just out of touch, it felt like a betrayal. Her economic warnings, already under intense scrutiny, now carried the weight of perceived hypocrisy. When leaders call for sacrifice, the expectation is that they set the tone. Reeves, in that moment, did the opposite. As criticism mounted, independent economists began analyzing the £22 billion sterling figure at the centre of her proposals. Their conclusion was clear. The math didn't add up.
Those national insurance rises haven't actually kicked in yet. They're about to kick in now. Is that going to depress the economy further?
Well, look, the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast. I recognise that there are costs. Because it's them who do the forecast.
Because you're the Chancellor, and you've mentioned the OBR, yeah. I think, now 5 times. Who's running this country? Is it you or the OBR?
I make the policy decisions, but it is right that forecasting is done by someone else. I shouldn't be marking my own homework, and I'm not going to be doing that. Unlike the previous government, I've got respect for those independent economic institutions. But, Trevor, your question is, do tax increases have an impact on the economy? Of course they do. But imagine if I'd have done something else last October. Imagine if I'd have swept the problems under the carpet and said everything was fine. Then today...
A number of economists quickly weighed in, arguing that the £22 billion sterling figure wasn't evidence of a looming financial crisis, but rather the result of flawed budgeting and short-term assumptions. It wasn't a fiscal emergency, it was a manageable discrepancy. Many saw it as a crisis constructed to justify harsh policy decisions. Some went further, warning that Reeves's proposed solutions, particularly tax increases, could end up doing more harm than good. Instead of solving the issue, they risk slowing growth, discouraging investment, and placing added pressure on working families. The supposed remedy, they said, could worsen the very problems it aimed to solve. As expert critiques mounted, a pattern emerged. This wasn't about financial necessity, but political strategy. The black hole wasn't economic. it was rhetorical. What began as a challenging interview started to reveal something more serious: the possibility of deliberate misrepresentation. By portraying the economy as on the brink, Reeves created urgency. An atmosphere where tax hikes and cuts could be sold as unavoidable. It's a well-known tactic. Escalate the threat, then offer hard solutions as the only way out. But when the threat itself is questionable, the foundation of public trust begins to crack. This wasn't just political messaging, it was narrative engineering, a story told to justify policy choices, with the public expected to foot the bill. Trevor Phillips' interview didn't just catch a politician off guard, it opened a window into deeper issues. It revealed a chancellor seemingly out of step with the evidence, dismissive of scrutiny, and possibly willing to amplify public fear to advance a political goal. This goes beyond a rocky interview or an ill-timed VIP outing. It challenges Labour's claim to be the party of economic fairness and responsibility. Reeves's performance, and the policy framing that followed, sits in stark contrast to that promise. For voters who supported Labour on the basis of trust, competence and transparency, the cracks are beginning to show. Instead of a new kind of leadership, they're seeing old habits return: unclear data, vague justifications, and leaders enjoying privilege while urging restraint. According to reports from within the party, concern is growing. Public trust is beginning to slip. And if the criticism continues to build, Labour could find itself losing ground with the very people it aimed to win over. In politics, credibility isn't permanent. It's constantly earned and re-earned. And in that interview, across from a calm but relentless Trevor Phillips, Rachel Reeves may have just failed one of her biggest tests yet. If you found this analysis insightful, hit the like button, subscribe for more political breakdowns, and let us know your take in the comments below.